I just won't pay 15% premiums for precious metals without a really good reason. It actually pains me to pay anything more than 6%. That makes it really hard to do a video like this. Gold is expensive right now. There's just no getting around it. We hear a few things. We hear that we might finally be moving into a recession. And typical case in a recession is that gold actually falls at some point. And then a few months later, it rips. We see it recover faster than anything else. That's if we look at historical charts. Now this also recognizes that we never know when a recession starts until after it does. So a small dip, a sporadic dip, there's really no way to know if that's a recession dip, at least not until after the case. So how do our plans change with gold in or around a recession? That's the question for this one. So two things we need to consider here. One is that we can't look at prior recessions and assume that all of the factors are just going to line up with what's happening today. We can't say that this one is going to be like 2008 or any other recession. The second thing is that some of the data that we're seeing and the actual designation of whether or not we're in a recession might be a little bit sketchy. How many times have we heard from analysts that we're actually in a recession just in the past 2 or 3 years, only to have data contradict that? Who's to say who's right there? Well, we have definitions, but those definitions have even changed, and it could simply be that we've avoided the recession label. So where would we even know where we fall in this thing? Are we ahead of a recession or behind one? Maybe all of the above. It would be hard to say. So we could see a case where a recession starts, meaning this formula used to determine whether we're in one hits after the Fed cuts rates. Well, now we'd have two cases. One is that gold should rip when rates are cut, and another is that, well, recessions tend to bring everything down, including gold, at least initially. So loose speculation on labels and timing aside, how does a recession really affect gold and silver? I mean, what we're trying to get to here is how it would affect us this time around. So let's just start with some quick data from goldsilver.com. This isn't showing recessions as much as it's showing stock market crashes and corrections, but this is coming from a pro metal site. We should start there. Goldsilver.com, they're telling a story. So they might be cherry picking some time frames a little bit, but you can see that gold does pretty well here. 5 of the recent 7 points show gold gaining in price during the recession or the market correction. Now silver does not, and the reason we're only talking about 7 rather than all 10 of these rows here is that 1987 included Black Monday, and that would require us going into really a whole video just about that. So we're looking at everything since then. Okay, new chart from the same source. And I get it, this isn't a great chart. It's a little hard to read. I should have tried a little bit harder, but we can see that gold falls at some point during the recession. Now these windows of time in gray, those are the recessions. So we can see gold fall before it rips. Now, we're not going to dive down too far on this. I know that George Gammon has covered some of this recently. I couldn't find a link to it directly. If I do, I'll put it in the description. But I've seen these percentages vary depending on the time frames. We can see the trend line, though. It follows the idea that gold drops during the recession, and that's based on its liquidity. It gets sold to cover losses. That's just one way to think about it. And then it's the first to take off. That's why we see these positive numbers. So put all that together, and what we have is an idea that gold dips in a recession and then it rips. Oh, great. We don't really know that we're in a recession, so that's not going to help us plan, but I'm sure there are people out there saying, buy the dip. Catch that quick recession dip for gold, but again, you don't know you're in a recession until after the fact. And if we went back to that first table, we would see that stocks dip far more than gold. So if you're being opportunistic, you might be able to catch a bigger bounce in other markets. The point there is just that buying all the gold that you can afford during a recession probably wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. And what I think it means personally is just slow down my purchases when gold prices spike, speed up my purchases when gold prices fall. So take the technical recession label out of it, since we don't know what's happening at the time. There are other indicators. I mentioned that I stopped buying gold or silver 2011 through mid or late 2013. What I knew was that gold and silver felt very expensive, and I knew I was taking a beating in other asset classes. So that made the decision very easy at the time. So you'll know, stock market might be crashing, jobs tanking, maybe the economy's bad, your Bitcoin's down 25%, Dogecoin millionaire, no longer a millionaire? I don't know, but you're going to be able to sense it. You have less money coming in, possibly more going out. Now, to me, that is not the time to go all in on gold. There might be a dip in there, but if we're sensing a recession, meaning we're affected by it, we might not have more money to put into gold. So I'll tell you where this applies to what we might do specifically in any kind of period of time where maybe we're going into a technical recession and we are definitely experiencing higher gold price. Well, a simple approach there would just be to consider slowing down purchases as prices rise. Pretty basic. If you've been wondering what's up with the fractional coins here, well, mystery solved. Because one way to do that would be to save up, buy on these quick price drops, but do it less frequently. And another would be to keep buying, but maybe buy less. That's where fractional comes in. Now, my problem with fractional is just how expensive the premiums are. To make fractional work, we need to be able to find it at a decent price. Now, some people, they make the argument that if gold is appreciating, premiums don't matter. Let me get one more chart in here from long-term trends that's going to demonstrate this idea. If we go all the way back to 1971 when Nixon took us off the gold standard and gets rid of any of that timeline cherry picking, we can see that gold has done really well. It's right on par with the S&P 500 in this time frame. So S&P 500 is in red, gold is in yellow, Dow is in blue, and then down at the bottom there, that's silver. So you can certainly show a strong enough performance for gold to justify buying it, maybe even with higher premiums, but what this chart does not show is two things. First, your compounding value if you reinvested dividends from the market, and second, your loss from premiums on physical metal purchases. So you might say that it can't be that big of a deal. It all works out, but what we're seeing here in the black line is what happens if you reinvest those dividends. And they're a small percentage of stock value, and we can see what that does over time. Well, premiums, that would do the opposite. So your gold and silver purchases are always going to perform worse than we're seeing on this chart, and much worse if you're paying a crazy amount in premiums. Fractional typically requires that. So if fractional is your plan, and I'm not saying it's a bad one, the trick is going to be finding better premiums. Now, I've been exploring this idea a little bit down to the 10th ounce size, and that's a size that typically has such high premiums that I just don't even try. But I found a few options, and we have something big coming. We're getting close to an announcement from a new player who's going to be helping with some of that, making the costs on fractional coins a lot more reasonable. And we're going to come back to that, but what you're seeing on the desk here, I've been able to find for less than 15% premium. So not horrible, and I'm not sure yet how much direct sense it makes strategically, but indirectly at least, it keeps me from pouring a bunch of money into all-time high prices, but doesn't cut me out of it entirely. So it's an interesting idea. Now, the idea here should always be trying to buy before the price rips. So you take advantage of the value gains rather than getting taken advantage of when you pay too much for the wrong things at the wrong time. I've talked before about setting a base buying schedule and then buying more if I see a 5, 10, or 15% drop. What I haven't really explained is how I've changed my base amount at the bottom level. So I went from a 1/4 ounce a month to an ounce a month until I hit a running goal, and then I just more or less gave up that schedule entirely and went all in on trying to buy the dips. Well, it's easier said than done. And what I'm hoping to do here is find a way to bring fractional back for scheduled purchases to just keep at it. So I'm exploring some new ways to buy. As you can see from the desk, I am giving it a try. I'm buying more fractional. If I can consistently get it for a decent price, I'll do more of it. Now, I definitely lean toward the wait and buy larger coins with lower premiums camp, but that does make it harder to jump when prices drop all of a sudden. Now, I'm not sure a 1/10 ounce would ever gain me anything because a 3% price swing in spot price, that's a big move, but the premium is easily 10% higher on a 10th ounce gold coin than it would be on a 1 ounce. So we're probably never going to be able to get ahead if we're looking at it that way. But do me a favor here. If you've been buying fractional, let us know what size and what premium you're finding, whether you have a ceiling for how much you'll pay. A 10th ounce, honestly, it's new to me, and I want to get a baseline and then work on ways to beat that. Like I mentioned, we do have a new option coming that we're going to be able to look into soon, but I would love to get a starting point prior to that. Let's get a plan and let's figure out how to beat it. I think that's a good place to end this. So let us know your thoughts on fractional gold coins in the comments. And then, of course, while you're there, be sure to hit that like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to hear more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.